like to introduce Mark Haas. Mark is the founder and co-founder and CEO of the Association for Enterprise Growth. And if we could unmute Mark, Mark can now introduce David.
Sure. Thanks, Tian. You're doing a good job. Maybe I'll just let you continue. AEG is really it's a unique business model. It's formed of about 40 individual advisors in the DC area in complementary disciplines. And as Tian talked about, mostly the financial, but we've got them in HR, technology, cyber, strategy, governance, sales, marketing, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is help the mid-market companies grow in a more complex environment rather than doing just sales and then just legal and then just financial. So we all work together in teams to provide that those services. And the integration of that is important. So, which is interesting because the word David comes from is he's really done a lot of interesting work over the years of integrating technology and putting into the marketing space. So he's the co-founder and CEO of Zeta Global, and it's a marketing company, but uses AI and technology to do sort of life cycle or end-to-end marketing for individuals rather than just on an individual campaign. It's focused on the individual person or company. Before Zeta, David started Infonic, which is a communications internet product. And once he sold that, he had a non-compete. So he hung out with some friends. He found a guy who did a little bit of marketing for Pepsi, and then went to a tech company called Apple. So he and his friend John Scully are co-founders of Zeta Global. So he's got an interesting story to tell, an interesting pathway he'll go through, and looking forward to hearing what David has to say.
Thanks, Mark. I wish I had known about you guys when I was starting one of my other companies. It would have been great to have that type of service.
Now, keep us on the address book for next time.
Definitely.
Great. Well, welcome, David. Thank you for joining us again. It's been a while since we had you on CONNECTpreneur. Can you bring us up to speed a little bit on what you've been doing the last 8 years? I think we have your bio in the program book, and you're a very, very well-known quantity around town and nationally and globally as well. But why don't we do that, and then we can dive in from there.
Well, I figured I must have really messed up 8 years ago not to be invited back, but I really appreciate the time. First of all, I mean, Tiang, I think what you've done in the entrepreneurial community, first starting in the DMV and then expanding out, is really extraordinary. And to try to continue it in these very challenging times when entrepreneurs really need support the most, I really applaud you and your team for that. It's great. But, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started 5 companies. I sold 3, took 1 public, then sold that before founding Zeta. People ask me how I became an entrepreneur, and I generally say I became an entrepreneur for the same reason a lot of us did. Nobody would hire me. I came out of school in 1990 during the whatever number Great Recession that was. And my dreams of ending up at Goldman Sachs were crushed very quickly. So I moved to DC to go to work for Senator Kennedy on the Hill. And I started working on telecom issues and ended up going into the wireless business. And as Mark said, I was in the wireless business for 17 years, founded 3 companies there, sold 2, took 1 public, and then left that. And when I left that company, I had a non-compete, so I had to figure out what to do in a post-wireless world. And John was one of the co-founders of Infonic with me. John and I have done 3 companies together, and John's, oddly one of my closest friends, which doesn't always happen with partners. I mean, I know a lot of really successful partners who are they don't socialize a lot, and yet they're able to be really efficient partners. John and I happen to socialize and do that. His wife Diane is great friends with my wife Kristen, and we spend a lot of time together. But the original vision for Zeta was a little bit of what Mark and his team are doing, which is take multiple vendors and put them together into one solution around customer lifecycle management. So how do you create, maintain, and monetize customers? We've pivoted a number of times over the years. Today, our data cloud, which is the third largest data set in the world behind two fairly small and unknown companies called Google and Facebook, tracks 2.5 billion people every moment of every day. Our artificial intelligence is effectively ingesting 1 trillion signals a day. It then converts those signals into intent. So we say data plus AI equals intent is really the key to our messaging at Zeta. And what we're trying to do is help very large companies. Our clients are like American Express, General Motors, Travelers, Northwest Mutual, JP Morgan Chase, Four Seasons, leading hotels of the world. We have 1,000 global enterprise clients. We're trying to help them better maintain their existing customers by helping them to understand their customers' behaviors outside of their ecosystem, while simultaneously helping them to drive new customers by using our data cloud to figure out who is most likely to be a high-value customer to them. My hobby, we run a fund called Cavis Investment Corp, where we invest into startup technology, primarily where Zeta can benefit the company we're investing in, or the company we're investing in can benefit Zeta. We're very, very simple at this point because we just don't have the time to look at everything we'd like to look at. The biggest thing I'm involved in outside of Zeta is a company called Pharmacy on Demand. You can see it at ondemandpharma.com. It's really cool. It's sort of the first thing I've ever done that could actually save people's lives. So as Mark pointed out, I think I've always done a pretty interesting job of taking technology and marketing and putting it together in creative ways. But this is a real game changer. Today, 75% of the pharmaceuticals we take in the United States are manufactured in India and China. And it's complex as you get into pandemics, as we're finding out, you get into other emergency circumstances. This is a 3D printer for pharmaceuticals. It takes base chemicals, the base chemicals of organic chemistry, ingests it into a refrigerator-sized machine, and medicine comes out the other side. So I'm chairman of that. It's run by Dr. Jeffrey Ling. The reason I bring it up is it's in the DMV. It's based just north of Columbia. It was founded inside of MIT and DARPA. So we weren't able to really talk about it for a lot of years, although with what's going on now, we're at the forefront in working with the White House on what's going on here. And it's been really interesting to me to sort of have effectively 2 full-time jobs during this period. I'm CEO and chairman of Zeta, and I'm executive chairman of Pharmacy on Demand. So that's sort of my hobby. And then I've got my family lives in Bethesda, Maryland. My 3 older kids and my first wife, who's a very good friend, live there, and I have a home in Bethesda, Maryland. So I started in DC and spent 17 years there before moving to New York. Although, as you pointed out, you have a number of people calling in from California. I'm one of them. I'm sitting in Manhattan Beach, California, as we speak right now. So I appreciated the 8 a.m. start time versus a 5 to 6 a.m. start time.
Right. Well, that's great. Thank you for the overview, and we have a lot to talk about. But I want to start with a topic that's very hot right now and controversial, sort of, and it's in your industry. It's the issue of privacy and Big Brother. We all saw the 60 Minutes expose on Cambridge Analytica recently. You're number 3 in the world in terms of collecting data. How do you balance business with privacy issues and governmental oversight and, protecting consumers as well as serving your clients?
Well, I'm really glad you started me with the softball. I mean, this was, really, remember, it's 8 a.m. here. Listen, we always put consumer privacy first. It's an important component of what we do. And interestingly enough, unlike the other big data clouds, you cannot buy our data at any price. What happens is our data ties back to a Zeta ID, never an individual. Now, the Zeta ID represents an individual, but our enterprise clients never see the individual. They only see the ID. And then you can only get access to the data when using our software. So we think of our data as the electricity that powers our software platform. So you can effectively target an individual, but it's being done inside of a closed ecosystem where the enterprise client doesn't even know the name, who we're targeting, why we're targeting them. All they know is that ID meets these attributes, and the artificial intelligence is recommending this curriculum of contact to that person. They obviously can figure it out after somebody purchases from them, so they can sort of put that together, although we never give them the raw behaviors. The behaviors always sit inside of an intent-based score. So I always like to say it's a percentage basis. My very smart PhDs remind me it's all effectively on a binary basis, so it's not a percentage, but it goes from 0 to 0.9, and that sort of works through that way. But Ben Hayes, who's our chief privacy officer, who was the chief privacy officer of Nielsen before joining us, and is the chairman of the Chief Privacy Officer Association of America. I might be misnaming them, but it's generally what that organization is. Really is very, very focused on making sure we are always out front. For example, we were GDPR compliant in Europe before we had to be, and we're already CCPA compliant, which is the new California Protection Agency, which most of the industry is taking on as sort of a national view, even though it's a California regulation. We've made it a global one. So we adhere to what the regulations associated with CCPA globally. So, listen, we track a lot of data, but we anonymize it. Even though you can get to the individual in our data ecosystem, it's to the ID, not to the individual.
Right, got it. And in terms of cybersecurity and protecting, I'm sure you guys are, with the data sets that you have, your prime, quote unquote, target for some of the bad guys. How are you protecting your information?
So, let me start by saying it's one of our single biggest investment points as a company, although I'm not the smartest guy remotely on this call on cybersecurity, knowing that you've got a lot of DMV people. Dr. Jeff Nimeroff, who has his PhD in data security and AI from the University of Pennsylvania, where he's an adjunct professor, is our chief information officer. And he and an entire global network operations center, our NOC, monitor this every minute of every day. The thing that freaks me out, which I always am surprised by, Tian, is I still don't think of us as big as we are, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, right? So you sort of do it. Now, the good news is, like most entrepreneurs, I've messed some stuff up pretty badly over the years. So now what I've learned to do is let people do their jobs who are exceptional at what they do, which I think is the hardest thing for an entrepreneur from an evolution perspective, because we all think we can do everything better than everybody. And then we manage to really mess some things up, which I have done badly over the years. So Dr. Nimeroff is exceptional at what he does. When we're having a glass of wine every once in a while or we're together, I'll be like, so do we get a lot of attempted intrusions? He's like, yeah, only, 5 to 10,000 a day. I'm like, are you kidding? He's like, oh no. And that's just the ones that are serious. He's like it would be multiples of that, of people who ping the system and are testing the system. But I know we have, our data set is broken into 28 different silos, none of which match without an encryption key. So even if somebody was able to get in, they would have to build the encryption key to put any of those silos together to get to the different data. So person's name might be in one silo, their demographic information might be across 6 silos, their behaviors might be across another 14 silos, and without the encryption key, you can't put it together. I know we run hackathons if anybody's interested. I'm sure Dr. Nimeroff would love to hear from you guys. We're always running hackathons and fun stuff like that around what is a very serious issue.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your global footprint? You have employees all over the world. You are traveling all over the world all the time, which is the real reason why we haven't been able to get
this week. Not this week.
Not this week. Yeah, right. But in terms of managing a global enterprise of the scale that you have, what are some of the things you're doing, and what are some of the challenges you're facing in doing that?
Well, we have 26 offices on 4 continents, which interestingly enough is always complex to manage. It's substantially more complex in a global pandemic, as we've learned.
Right.
To your point, my wife was sort of laughing. We've been together now 30 days. This is the longest we've ever been together. But I think this is the longest I've been in one place since I went to university. But when I did a trip in January, in fact, I think you and I were messaging while I was on it, where late January into February I went, sort of LA, New York, Dubai to Hyderabad, India, then down to Bangalore, up to bird just flew into my window. He's fine. Flew away. Down to Bangalore, up to Delhi, then over to Tokyo, and then up to Honolulu, over to Maui, and then back to LA, then back to DC, back to New York, then back to LA in about 17 days. But when I landed back in New York, sort of the first week of February, when I was in Japan in particular, I was very nervous. It was just the beginning of the Chinese New Year. And, as I think we all know, that's when the vast majority of the Chinese population decide to travel. So we were, I like to wake up early in the morning and do something so that I'm not sitting in a conference room all day. So I have a very good friend in Tokyo. He picked me up. We went out to Mount Fuji, and there were probably 10,000, Chinese people walking around with very serious masks, some people with like full-on masks. And I got back and I said to my team, I wasn't smart enough to think it was going to hit America because we've largely been immune, pun, to a lot of the global pandemics. But I was very worried about India. And I said to my team the first week of February, we better figure out a work from home solution for the 800 people we have sitting in our campus and our offices in India. Because, working from home in America, as frustrated as you might be with it, and as annoyed as you might be with your dog jumping in your lap during your call or your kids screaming, it is a walk in the park compared to India. The vast majority of our employees didn't have home high-speed access. We had a number of employees who lived in communal settings. We had over half of our employees worked on desktops. So through the month of February, we bought 450 laptops and Chromebooks. We got hotspots for the homes of about 600 of our employees. We rented 27 fairly sizable flats in India, in Hyderabad. We cleaned them out completely. We set up living and working solutions for all of our employees that lived in communal areas. We have cooks and chefs at our campus there that we've been able to get special permits to go out even through what is probably the most serious lockdown globally right now in India. And they're securing food for our people and delivering it to our people's homes because we were able to get them permits to go out to secure this. This is all stuff you would never even consider in America, where, my average employee is hitting DoorDash for lunch and, their biggest problem is it's taking them 2 weeks to get an Instacart delivery, right? Over there, it's very serious. So, the good news is we haven't gone down. We do have a number of employees globally who have tested positively, which we're working with and helping. We've got an alert system internally on how do we then notify others. I was in a room for 8 hours in a conference room with a very good friend who got it in San Francisco. I can talk about it because he's posted publicly about it. And we had 2 dinners. Thank goodness it's now been almost 26 days since I saw him, or 22 days since I saw him, and I'm not sick at this point. But it's very complex in a normal day. The single biggest thing I think we do that a lot of other companies do not do is, to your point, we travel often to make sure our global employees understand we care about them and we love them and they're a big part of our organization. We cycle a number of our employees in India, the Philippines, Czech Republic, Singapore, back to the United States and London. And then we cycle employees from the United States, Great Britain, Paris, Benelux and all those places. We cycle them to India, the Philippines, and the Czech Republic. So everybody's sort of always feeling the love, so to speak.
Right. Well, I'm so sorry to hear about the plight of some of your employees. That's pretty tough these days. This pandemic is affecting everybody. One of our questions is from Laura Hill, who's one of our co-hosts today. She's a VP at Equify, and she wants to know what you're doing in this pandemic in terms of, business from a business standpoint, in terms of opportunities and challenges and how you're dealing with it?
Well, first of all, Laura, I love your view. I don't know if that's a Zoom background or your apartment, but it looks amazing. Well, I can't hear you, but so reality is that, Winston
New York
Churchill.
City.
Well, perfect. You're in ground zero. But so the reality is that, the quote is accredited to many people, although I've heard it most accredited to Winston Churchill: never waste a crisis. It is your single greatest opportunity to inject change into your organization and take advantage of opportunities that you otherwise would not do. And we've seen this evidenced again and again. Now, I will tell you, in the last downturn of 2007, 2008, I made every wrong decision possible and ended up losing my company, Infonic, over it because we didn't act fast enough. We didn't cut cost enough. We didn't get our balance sheet into a place where we had liquidity. We had the wrong senior team. I sort of was incredibly loyal to the people who'd been with me for 10 years, and they were great people. But in many cases, we had the wrong guys in the wrong roles. That's not to say we had all the wrong guys in the wrong roles. I mean, there were some amazing people. And I love that the vast majority of the senior execs at Infonic are now entrepreneurs themselves, running their own companies. And many in the DMV are just killing it. And you look at Tom Davidson, who's one of the guys who helped me found Infonic and running EverFi. You look at Trip Donnelly, who was the guy. Like he was with me every step of the way, running his amazing company. Frank Bennett, who is our COO, is running a great consulting and mobile company in Northern Virginia and DC. And I could go on and on. I mean, there's so many guys who came out of that company. But what I'm looking at today is you either get smarter or you get dead. And every mistake we made at Infonic, we're trying to do the exact opposite here, right? So we had a great CFO for a very long time, but we brought in a new one because the people who get you to where you are not always the right people to take you where you want to go. And it was a big decision for us, and it was very difficult. And, whereas in Infonic, we kept saying things are going to turn. We went into action at Zeta. We took 18% of our fixed operating expense out. To put in perspective, that was $38 million, which we took out of our fixed expenses within 14 days of making the decision that this was going to be very serious. And we did it while simultaneously only having to eliminate 4.7% of our global workforce, which we're pretty proud of, quite frankly. We asked everybody in the company from director up to take between 5 and 15% pay deferrals, which we replaced 2-for-1 in stock. So for every dollar you gave us in a deferral of pay, we gave you $2 in Zeta stock. And if we hit our board-approved budget at the end of the year, which is aggressive at this point, everybody gets that money back in cash in a one-time bonus, and everybody's salary reverts to where it was on April 1st of next year. That was one example. And we terminated all non-critical vendors. We looked at fixed overhead across the board. Now, the other good news is for guys like us, we spend a lot of money on travel, entertainment, and trade shows. That goes to zero, so that's a freebie. We're effectively zero. And literally, to put it in perspective, all of those decisions were made in March. 75 to 80% of the monthly amount will flow to cash in April, 85% in May, and 95% in June. We don't get to 100% for a few months after that. And all of that relates to severance because we made the decision that we were going to honor our normal severance policy to our employees because these are great people. We wouldn't be eliminating them if it wasn't a time of crisis. I then, after we made every decision, we literally did everything on a Wednesday. Thursday morning, I did an all hands, which we do generally once a quarter, but we did an immediate all hands. I spoke to every one of our global employees. We now have 1,500 global people down from 1,600 global people. And I at the end of my talk, I put my email address out there. I mean, everybody has it from the naming convention, but I said, please email me. I want to hear what you're thinking. If you're not getting what you need, I want to know about it personally. This is our time to not waste a crisis. And if we can come through this strong, the opportunities to buy great businesses that don't have the type of balance sheet we have and add their tech and their people to our tech stack, or their data and their people to our data stack, are going to be unlike anything we've seen in the last 12 years, right? And I got 37 emails within an hour of employees who were below directors saying they'd be willing to take a pay cut too if they needed to, because the way we positioned it, which is the truth, we were able to save 100 incremental jobs of their friends and coworkers because we all took that pay cut. And of course, I led from the front. I took the largest pay cut. But it doesn't matter. It's sort of what we're doing, and we're all in it together. So once we got our fixed costs right, we met with all of our lending groups, all of our investors, all of our banks. We were able to put together a new facility, which we were able to do before a lot of people were even thinking about it, which got us to the front of the line for everything. We've already put a new facility in place on top of our existing facility. The hope is we don't need to draw it. And my investors, which are all sort of like big private equity and now Canadian pension funds, have all given commitments for equity investment, which I'm going to personally lead the equity investment if needed. But we've got the primary plan, which is, thank goodness, we have a lot of cash and we generate meaningful free cash as a business. Now, I'm not even targeting free cash flow for April, May, June. Like, our whole goal is, how do we just get to a point of break even for those 3 months from a cash flow perspective, deliver the type of EBITDA that keeps us in our debt covenants, which is another thing we have to walk, although we're, knock on wood, in very good shape there. We did fully renegotiate our debt covenants with KKR, who were an amazing partner. In early March, once again, I said, if this hits India, this could be a problem for us. Let's get out in front of this. And it's the good news is, because we failed last time, we acted much sooner this time. We were able to get to results that if we called today, I do not think we could get to. I'm not suggesting we'd be in as bad a shape as last time, but we also have a radically different balance sheet from last time, where we were heavily over-levered. We had borrowed money. The single worst decision I have ever made in my life was to borrow 9 figures from a bank to buy back stock in an up market, and ended up paying for that in the down market. But the mistakes we made on the last one were long. We're trying to learn from that. Now, I think any company that comes out of this, Laura, once they come out, if you come out solid, the opportunities, to hire people are going to be nothing like we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years. There's nobody on this call who hasn't hired a B or C player and paid them 150% of what they've deserved over the last 7 years at some point, because there was just nobody to hire, right? That is going to reverse itself in as meaningful and fast a way as probably since the Great Depression. So literally, you're now going to be in an environment where you can hire some of the greatest people in the world at what they deserve, or maybe even slightly less, to bring that type of horsepower into your organization. And by the way, we cut a lot of jobs, but we still have open job recs in areas where we absolutely, if we can find an amazing PhD, with AI experience, who understands what he or she are doing, we want to hire them even in this market. And the good news is, like, we're in Silicon Valley, we're in San Francisco, we're normally sort of battling it out with Apple, Facebook, Google. And, the initial conversation always starts with Zeta who. So we're coming from behind there with those guys freezing. It puts us in a good position to start bringing in great human capital. So I know that's a long-winded answer to a short question, but I do think it's a really critical time, and for entrepreneurs to be acting with the type of immediacy that they need to with cutting costs. And I will tell you, some of you might not want to do it. And I was adamantly opposed to this 12 years ago. Like, I would not do it. It killed our company. And every one of the 1,000 employees we had ended up ultimately, or not everyone, the vast majority of them ended up losing their jobs because we didn't make those cuts. And John Scully says to me all the time, if you've got a dead limb on a tree and you don't cut it off, the whole tree's going to die. If you take it off, the tree can flourish and live, which is, once again, not to insinuate the people we're cutting were sort of dead weight. But in this environment, you have no choice because business is going to contract no matter what you think.
Well, that's a great answer. I mean, you drew from a lot of lessons in the past, and you have the benefit of having a great team. And I like how you're playing aggressive defense, if you will. From an offensive standpoint, are you seeing any things in the market in this environment over the next 3 to 12 months, say, that Zeta can capitalize on? And talk about what your future plans are once we get to the other side of this. You know, are you guys going to go public? Are you continuing to look to acquire companies? You have great private equity behind you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's a really long question for you know, but the reality is that you know, we did all of the cost cutting over effectively 14 days, virtually, not from let's do this to implementation, which, by the way, we had never let go more than 10 people on any given time. So now we were doing 100 in one day. You had the HR, you had legal, you had finance. We did it in multiple countries. It was not a fun thing to do. We then did the all hands on Thursday. Friday, I hosted a brainstorming session, also on Zoom, for our global customer-facing people on what verticals are going to grow in this environment, right? So home delivery is going to grow, right? Very logical, very natural. We found massive customer growth in what's called the QSR space, quick serve restaurants. You know, we think of them more as Burger King and Applebee's and those guys who have had to massively pivot from dine-in to delivery to save themselves. So we took our data cloud, and in 24 hours, we took every single restaurant for a global restaurant chain. We did it to start in America. We put a 5-mile, 7-mile, and 10-mile concentric circle around each one of their restaurants that was open for delivery. We then looked at who delivers for that exact restaurant within 5 miles, within 7 miles. Some we couldn't even get out 10 miles. Some you got to 8.6 miles, 8.7. We were then able to layer over all of the known cases that had been reported by volume into that, because a lot of our clients were very sensitive. They didn't want to do a lot of marketing into areas that were bubbles or hotspots. And we were able to put together delivery, messaging, and marketing for them within 48 hours that allowed them to take very large sort of branded TV budget and move it into, you know, the digital ecosystem. So, for example, we believe that this will be the single biggest flight to digital marketing in history, right? So the vast majority of global marketing, which is still 70%, is analog: TV, radio, print, outdoor advertising, and direct mail. Digital only makes up 30%. We believe this will be the catalyst to those numbers sort of juxtaposing. In fact, my partner, John Scully, and I are doing our first ever webinar together on Thursday. So if anybody's interested in what John has to say, starting with sort of he created this thing called the Pepsi Challenge, all the way to creating Apple's 1984 ad, and then sort of how that's changed today into targeted digital AI, John and I are going to be doing that together on Thursday. But the reality is...
Right, well, let me interrupt for a second. If you or Zach could post the link to the webinar for our audience, that would be great. And I'm planning to be on too, so I'm really excited to hear what you and John have to say.
We appreciate that, Tiong. I really do. And the reality is, though, that's to me the opportunity to show clients who are used to analog what digital can do. And it's not just sort of advertising on the internet anymore. It's really digital TV. So OTT, addressable TV, stuff like YouTube TV and Fire, Amazon and all these different TV channels. Our platform can automatically target an individual there, in addition to, emailing them, mobile marketing, social marketing, and programmatic marketing. All of it targets to the individual off of that ID. We do believe that going forward, that's going to be a massive opportunity to take advantage of, that. The last thing I'll say is we built, for example, a sports audience package. So literally, companies spent hundreds of millions of dollars building out ads to run alongside baseball, to run alongside the Masters, to run alongside the NCAA tournament. We have replicated the exact individuals who would be watching the Masters on the internet, and we can show the Cadillac ad, GM's a client, show the Cadillac ad to that exact consumer who would have seen it while watching the Masters. They can see the Masters-made ad while watching something else on their CTV or see it on video online or so on and so forth. I think for us, the opportunity is to show what our data cloud can do in an environment where people are going to have to, A, cut cost, and B, focused on return on marketing investment, which quite frankly are our mantras and have been for many, many years.
We have about 5 minutes left or so. I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about, you've built $2 billion plus enterprises, tremendous track record. You've been up, down, up, and continuing to soar. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on the call. What kind of 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give an entrepreneur in light of the fact that, we're all grinding, struggling. It's a tough business to be an entrepreneur, as we all know. But what do you feel has been the key 2 or 3 things that you would attribute to your massive success? And what kind of advice would you give to us entrepreneurs who are grinding away here with a lot of uncertainty, fear, doubt, all that stuff?
Well, the good news and the bad news, at least for me, is the uncertainty and fear never goes away, right? So that, people always say, what are the attributes that make a successful entrepreneur? And I usually start with an aptitude for risk. It's not blind risk. It's an aptitude for risk. And that's something that I've learned over the years is different. I used to think it was the ability to take risk. It's not. I mean, obviously the first leap is risk, but I now look at it and say, okay, if we're going to risk $1 and I can lose 100% of that dollar and I can make $2, that's not a good investment. If I can risk $1 and risk 50 cents on the downside and make $5, that's a great investment. That's the difference between pure risk and aptitude for risk. And I think you get in there. A number of years ago, Inc. wrote a really interesting article. They were nice enough to sort of put me on the cover. And it was called The Rise and Fall and Rise Again of David Steinberg. And this put it all in sort of perspective for me. I brought it home, and my son, who's now 16 years old, 6'2", 190, and benching 250 pounds, was then a young boy. He was probably 9 years old, 10 years old. And I showed him the article, and he looked at me. He was really sad. He got a little alligator tear in his eye. He was like, "Daddy, when did you fall? Did you get hurt? Are you okay?" And it was moments like that that showed me that failure is okay. Like, my son loved me so much that it just didn't matter. And getting off the mat after failing at my last company, which I take full ownership of, I made all of the wrong decisions in the downturn that led us to that. Listen, it's very humbling. And the good news is, for me at least, coming out of that, I've stayed a lot more humble than I think I was at one point. I think I'm a lot more collaborative than I was at one point. I'm definitely more empowering of the people who are under me. But I remember walking out of Infonic and sitting in the space next door that one of my great friends, Michael Walden, who ran corporate development at Infonic. He's now running a big fund and doing exceptionally well. We had sort of set out this idea, which really became the germination to this fund, Cavis, that I had started. And I went from having 1,000 employees to 3 of us sitting in a room. And I was sort of like, all right, what are we going to do now? And I really understand the plight of most entrepreneurs. What I will tell you, and I mean this, A, fail fast. If your idea is not working, really, this idea of you never give up is wrong. Pivot, 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 pivot. Go to where the puck is going, not where it is. And that's really what you have to do. Now, at the same time, you have to grind. You have to be tenacious. You have to continue to follow people. Now, by the way, my saying that does not mean I want 5,000 emails on LinkedIn for your service, which is what generally happens, where I then get 5,000 messages like, "I know you said to be tenacious, so I'm going to be tenacious." this is not about not messaging me. It's like, it's just not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is be tenacious within yourself. Keep your confidence. Keep what you're trying to do. Really focus on what your goal is, and then sell that dream to your team. And if you can sell that dream to your team, you can lead them anywhere. And great leadership translates from great generals to great CEOs to great teachers and to great doctors, right? It doesn't matter. If you can sell your dream and you're willing to lead from the front, you're ultimately going to win. But you might fail along the way, as I have. I failed big. Getting up off the canvas was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
That's great. We appreciate your sharing with that. It's funny, David Gardner 2 weeks ago said the same exact thing. He said, it's okay to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. You're still an entrepreneur. You still have heart. You're still a good person. I think that's really a great lesson for all of us. So, I definitely appreciate that very much. In terms of if you had to say, what do you attribute? You have a tremendous amount of resilience and optimism and intelligence and the ability to drive vision. What would you say? You've done 2 unicorns. Not many people can say very few have done 1. You've done 2. If someone were to say, David, how did you do this? Because 1 could be lucky. Well, 2,
By the way, I do think Pharmacy on Demand will be 3rd, which I'm co-founder of.
Okay.
But we'll see. We're not there yet.
Keep them in Maryland, please, in Montgomery County.
In fact, we're looking for massive lab space right now in the sort of Baltimore research quadrant. And the CEO, Dr. Ling, is working with a real estate firm already there and focused on that. He's been putting his masks on every day and going out to do it. But that business really bodes well to there. I mean, the problem with Zeta was it really needed to be in New York and San Francisco. It just would have been very hard to build it in the DMV just from the human capital we needed at that time. I mean, today you could probably do it, but back then it didn't. I think, I've seen great entrepreneurs speak, and I've been really blessed to spend time with them. And I've sat with, Bill Gates, and I've sat with, some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, Michael Dell. And I'm not sure anybody really knows why they end up where they are. I think we all try to construct an answer. I don't think we really know the answer. I mean, at least I don't. I mean, I know that I've worked harder than almost anybody I've ever known. I know that I, wake up at 5 a.m. to this day, work out, start working, and I work until very late at night. As far as great intelligence, I'm not sure my wife would agree with you that I have it. But the reality is that I'm certainly able to think very quickly. So I'm able to figure things out generally a little faster than other people, which doesn't necessarily mean I'm smarter than other people, but I'm certainly able to do that. And I've been able to sell my dream. I will tell you that. I am, I love the old adage when people say, and I do this in bars with friends, so it's my favorite trick, is you've got a glass that's got liquid in it. And I always say, is the glass half empty, half full, or something else? And everybody always looks at it and says, well, I know you think it's half full. I say, no, I don't. I don't think it's half full. And they get really shocked. They're like, you think it's half empty? I'm like, no, the glass is totally full. It's filled with half liquid and half air. So literally, when you look at me from an optimistic perspective, you will not find somebody more optimistic than me. Like literally, that's sort of my persona. And interestingly enough, it really hurt me going into the last downturn because I was so optimistic that we would get through it. I didn't make the decisions we should have made. And today I've sort of surrounded myself with the team. Steve Gerber, who's our global president and COO, is the greatest operating partner I've personally ever had. And he really runs the business Chris Geiner, who's our CFO, is a rock star, and Steve Vine, who's our general counsel, has done so many businesses you can't count. These guys are just rock stars. I mean, you look at my last team, it also had rock stars. Walt Leach, who was my general counsel there and still one of my closest friends. These are DC guys who are rock stars. We had some of the right people in the right places. Brian Westrick, who ran, sales there. All the different people. We had Don Charlton, who was our COO for the longest time before Frank came in. I mean, just amazing people that helped us get there. I probably made bad decisions and pushed them down, whereas today I'm letting the decisions more boil up. And I said, listen, we got to take cost out. Chris and Gerber jumped in and they made decisions that, quite frankly, I wouldn't have been capable of making because of my optimist level. But at the end of the day, I said, do it. And, it's just sort of what's led me to where I am, learning to empower people and let them make the decisions while I focus more on capital formation, customer relationships, strategy and M&A. I let them really do what they need to do to run the company.
Well, that's been great, David. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying watching your journey of self-awareness and success, and it's really a joy to see because I've known you for so long. And tell John I said hi. I met him when he was on your board back at Infonic, and I think we had a couple of cocktails at Morton's and Tyson's. But
I said it's great to see him. We all had dinner together one night, didn't we?
Yeah. With Jack Kemp was there, I think, and we had some. It was interesting.
We had an interesting board at Infonic. Kempy, Tom Wheeler, chairman of the FCC, and of course John Scully, and my good friend Terry McCullough, who I think ended up accomplishing a few things in Virginia. We had a lot of really interesting guys, and in fact Terry's still one of my best friends. So it's great. I'm still in Maryland when it's not a pandemic 3 times a month. To be with my kids, and I have a home there, and I keep an office in Georgetown because I've had an office there now for over 25 years, not to date myself, but I started Sterling when I was 21. So it's been doing this a long time.
Amazing. And so it's been great to see. It's great to see your kids grow up. I remember all the swim meets and everything. 6'2", 190. Wow. He could probably take you down now, I think.
Oh, and by the way, he plays football in Rose Crew. And when we go out to play basketball, he's now pushing me around the court, not the other way. But Tian, I really want to finish on what an extraordinary job you've done helping the entrepreneurial community in the DMV and now expanding out to the country. There are so few people who care as much about it as you do. And I'm really honored to be associated with you and your organization. And I, hopefully you won't wait 8 more years to bring me back again. But I appreciate it, and I appreciated the time today.
Well, thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Be safe. You and Kristen out there, enjoy the sunshine. And thank you so much for joining. I hope you can stick around. I'm sure a lot of our attendees are going to want a private message with you. And I know you're a busy guy too. So thank you for spending your morning with us.
It's not that I'm too busy. It's just I had blocked till 9 because I thought we'd have some time. We ended up running a little over, but I got to jump. But my email for anybody who really wants to reach me for this purpose is das@zetaglobal.com. So my naming convention is different than everybody else in the company. I will tell you just in advance, I make no decisions and forward no emails around accounting services, legal services, or recruiting services. So please don't send me like inundation of that. But always, or real estate. I mean, I'm always really happy to meet entrepreneurs, and we're actively investing. We're looking for great opportunities. We have great teams that want to do stuff like that. If you have an offering you do think is game changing, we want to see it. But I just catalog it or caveat it with, we have our vendors and we're pretty embedded with them at this point as it relates to that. Not to leave on a negative note, but love the organization, would love to hear from people. And if you have questions, I'm happy to reply.
Thank you so much, David. Enjoy the day, and thank you for joining us. And I wanted to now transition to our rocket pitch. So you might see some great companies here, David.